She was just trying to get through another wedding as a single mom, until she found a billionaire crying in the garden, about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The champagne flutes caught the afternoon sunlight like tiny prisms, casting rainbow fragments across the marble terrace of the Whitmore estate. String quartets played Pachelbel's canon, while guests in designer gowns and tailored suits mingled beneath crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than Celeste Marlowe's entire year's rent. The air hummed with polite laughter, the soft clink of silverware against fine china, and conversations peppered with names she'd only heard whispered in society magazines. Celeste adjusted her modest navy dress, the same one she'd worn to her college graduation 5 years ago, and smoothed down 7-year-old Olivia's hair for the third time. They'd driven here in her dented Honda Civic, its engine making that concerning rattling sound that meant another expensive repair bill looming. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Their beat-up sedan parked between a gleaming Bentley and a Tesla, like a dandelion blooming stubbornly between prize-winning roses. "Mommy, why is everything so shiny here?" Olivia whispered, her wide eyes taking in the towering floral arrangements and ice sculptures shaped like swans. "Because some people have different kinds of beautiful things, sweetheart," Celeste replied, though she felt like an outsider peering through the glass of a world she'd never belonged to. Her friend Maria had insisted she come. "You never get out, Celeste. Live a little." But now she wondered if she'd made a mistake. The celebrations swirled around them in waves of silk and sophistication. Waiters in white gloves offered delicacies she couldn't pronounce, while conversations drifted between vacation homes in the Hamptons and upcoming charity galas. Celeste nursed a single glass of champagne, calculating in her head how much this one reception probably cost. Enough to cover Olivia's school supplies for the next decade, easily. But as the golden hour approached, something shifted. The perfect soundtrack of celebration seemed to fade, as Celeste's attention was drawn beyond the French doors, past the manicured lawn where peacocks strutted freely, to the edge of the estate's rose garden. There, beneath the drooping branches of an ancient willow tree, sat a figure in shadows. At first glance, he looked like any other wedding guest. Expensive charcoal suit, perfectly styled hair, the kind of confident posture that spoke of boardrooms and business deals. But as Celeste watched, she noticed something that made her maternal instincts stir. His broad shoulders were trembling. His head was buried in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent sobs that seemed to echo from somewhere deeper than grief. While inside the estate, guests toasted the bride and groom with crystal glasses and practiced smiles. This man sat alone in his private agony. The juxtaposition struck her like a physical blow. All this wealth, all this perfection, and someone was still breaking apart in the shadows. Celeste knew that particular kind of pain. She'd felt it the night she'd sat in her car outside the lawyer's office, divorce papers in hand, wondering how she'd explain to 3-year-old Olivia why Daddy wasn't coming home. She'd experienced it during those long nights, when the bills piled up and the freelance work dried up, when she'd cry quietly in the shower so Olivia wouldn't hear. But she'd also learned something else. Sometimes the smallest gestures could pull someone back from the edge. "Livy, stay right here with Miss Maria for a minute, okay?" she whispered to her daughter, who was contentedly munching on a tiny sandwich that probably cost more than their usual dinner. Celeste walked across the pristine lawn, her sensible heels sinking slightly into the soft earth. As she drew closer, she could make out more details. This wasn't just sadness. This was a man coming apart at the seams, his expensive facade cracking to reveal something raw and desperate underneath. Have you ever comforted a stranger? Drop a heart if you believe small acts of kindness can change everything. The grass was damp beneath her feet as Celeste approached the willow tree, her heart hammering against her ribs. Up close, she could see the man more clearly. Mid-30s, with dark hair that looked like it had been perfectly styled hours ago, but was now disheveled from running his hands through it. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. But right now, he looked as lost as any broken soul she'd ever encountered. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice carrying the same gentle firmness she used when Olivia woke from nightmares. "Are you all right?" He startled, his head snapping up to reveal red-rimmed eyes and a face that belonged on magazine covers, if magazine covers featured men in the throes of emotional collapse. For a moment, he just stared at her, as if trying to process that someone had actually approached him. He cleared his throat, attempting to reassemble his composure. I'm fine, just needed some air. But Celeste had spent years reading between the lines of her daughter's I'm fine declarations. She knew the difference between fine and falling apart. Without hesitation, she knelt down on the grass beside the marble bench, her navy dress pooling around her knees. The gesture was so unexpected, so completely outside the social protocols of a place like this, that his carefully constructed mask slipped entirely. You don't look fine, she said simply. You look like someone who's carrying the weight of the world. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. That's surprisingly accurate. He studied her face, confusion flickering across his features. Do I know you? Are you here with the Hendersons? Maria Gonzalez is my friend. She works in catering. I'm Celeste. She settled more comfortably on the ground, as if sitting in designer grass stains was the most natural thing in the world. You don't have to tell me what's wrong. Sometimes it just helps to know someone cares. Someone cares. He repeated the words like he was testing a foreign language. When was the last time someone said that to me, without wanting something in return? The question hung in the evening air between them. Celeste watched as he struggled with emotions that clearly weren't allowed in his usual world. Vulnerability wasn't exactly a billionaire's best accessory. I'm supposed to be celebrating, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Everyone expects me to be happy. My family, the board, the arrangements that have been made. He gestured vaguely toward the estate. But I feel like I'm suffocating. Arrangements? Celeste asked gently. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words came out in a rush. Have you ever felt like your entire life was planned out for you? Like you were just playing a role someone else wrote? Celeste thought about her own life, the unexpected pregnancy, the divorce, the scramble to build something meaningful from the pieces. I've felt trapped before, she admitted, but never by success. That must be a different kind of prison. Prison. He looked at her with something close to wonder. No one's ever called it that before. They just say I'm lucky, blessed, that I should be grateful. Gratitude and happiness aren't the same thing, Celeste said. My daughter taught me that. She can be grateful for dinner and still wish it was pizza instead of vegetables. For the first time since she'd approached, he almost smiled. How old is your daughter? 7, and wiser than most adults I know. Celeste glanced back toward the estate where she could see Olivia through the French doors, still safely beside Maria. She asked me once why rich people on TV always look sad. I told her money can't buy the things that really matter. And what really matters, he asked, leaning forward slightly. Connection, purpose, the feeling that you're living your own life, not someone else's expectations of what your life should be. He was staring at her now with an intensity that made her cheeks warm. You really believe that? I have to. It's the only way I sleep at night. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the sounds of the celebration drifting over them like distant music. Finally, he spoke again. I don't think I've introduced myself. Donovan Blackwell. The name should have meant something to her. She was sure she'd heard it in business news or society pages, but in this moment, he was just a broken man who needed kindness. Nice to meet you, Donovan. Though I wish it were under happier circumstances. Actually, he said, and this time his smile was real, I think these might be the most honest circumstances I've experienced in years. Comment below, what would you do if you saw someone crying alone at a celebration? Donovan's fingers traced the edge of the marble bench as he gathered the courage to continue. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of quiet that invited truth. My engagement party is next week, he said finally, the words coming out like a confession. To a woman I've known for exactly 18 months. Our families have been planning this union for 3 years. Celeste felt her eyebrows rise. Union? That's a business term. Because that's what it is. His laugh was bitter. The Blackwell-Montgomery merger, complete with a prenup thicker than most novels. She's beautiful, accomplished, comes from the right family. on paper, were perfect. And in reality? In reality, we've had maybe 6 conversations that weren't about wedding planning or social obligations. She doesn't know I hate caviar, that I read mystery novels, or that I once wanted to be a teacher before my father convinced me the family business was my destiny. He looked at Celeste with eyes that held decades of resignation. I've spent so long being who everyone expects me to be, I forgot who I actually am. The weight of his confession settled between them. Celeste understood the feeling of being trapped, though her cage had been built from necessity rather than privilege. I know about forgetting yourself, she said quietly. When Olivia's father left, I spent 2 years just surviving. Every decision was about paying rent, keeping food on the table, making sure she had what she needed. I forgot I was anything more than just Olivia's mom. How did you remember? She reminded me. Celeste smiled, thinking of her daughter's stubborn insistence on bedtime stories, even when Celeste was exhausted. One night, she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. Not what I was, but what I wanted to be. I realized I'd stopped dreaming entirely. Donovan absorbed this, his gaze distant. I can't remember the last time someone asked me what I wanted. It's always been about what's expected, what's best for the company, what maintains the family reputation. What would you want, if you could choose anything? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I'd want to wake up next to someone who loved me for who I am when no one's watching. I'd want to teach my kids to ride bikes and help with homework. I'd want to build something meaningful, not just profitable. Those aren't unreasonable dreams. They are when you're worth $3 billion and your every move affects stock prices. The number should have impressed her, but all Celeste could see was the man who looked utterly defeated by his own success. Money doesn't make you less human, she said. It just makes it harder for people to see your humanity. They sat in the growing twilight, 2 people from completely different worlds finding common ground in their shared loneliness. The sounds of the party continued behind them. Laughter, music, the clink of expensive glasses, but it felt like they existed in their own bubble of honesty. Tell me about your freedom, Donovan said suddenly. What's it like to make choices just because you want to? Celeste considered this. Terrifying, mostly. Every choice I make affects Olivia's future. But it's also liberating. When I take a freelance project, it's because I believe in it. When I spend our grocery money on a book for her, it's because I think wonder is more important than perfect nutrition. When I hug her at night, it's because I love her, not because it's expected. You make it sound like a superpower. Maybe it is, the power to choose authenticity over approval. She looked at him seriously, but it comes with a price. I've been scared, broke, and judged more times than I can count. And you'd choose it again? Without hesitation, she nodded. Every single time. Donovan stared at her, as if she'd revealed some profound secret. In the distance, they could hear the wedding party beginning to wind down, guests starting to filter toward the parking area where valets waited with gleaming cars. I should get back, Celeste said, glancing toward the estate. Olivia needs her bedtime routine. But neither of them moved. As Celeste stood to leave, brushing grass stains from her dress, she paused and looked back at Donovan. The man who had seemed so broken just an hour ago now sat straighter, something shifting in his expression. You know, she said softly, my grandmother used to tell me that kindness is like dropping a pebble in still water. You never know how far the ripples will reach. She smiled, the same gentle expression she gave Olivia when encouraging her to be brave. Sometimes the smallest acts of compassion change everything. Donovan watched her walk back toward the estate, her figure disappearing through the French doors where warm light spilled onto the terrace. She moved with purpose, collecting her daughter and saying goodbyes, completely unaware that she'd just altered the trajectory of his entire existence. He remained on the bench long after her dented Honda had disappeared down the estate's circular drive. The wedding celebration continued around him, guests laughing over nightcaps, the bride and groom making their rounds of gratitude. But Donovan felt suspended outside of it all, as if he were watching his life from a great distance. Kindness changes everything. The words echoed in his mind as he finally stood and walked back into the reception. He smiled at the appropriate moments, shook hands with business associates, even managed to congratulate the happy couple. But inside, a war was raging. By midnight, the last guests had departed. Donovan sat in his penthouse apartment, still wearing his wedding attire, staring out at the city lights that stretched endlessly below. His phone buzzed with messages. His assistant confirming tomorrow's meetings, his fiancée Victoria texting about flower arrangements, his mother reminding him about the engagement party menu tasting. Each notification felt like another chain binding him to a future he'd never chosen. He pulled up Victoria's contact information, her perfectly posed profile photo staring back at him. Beautiful, accomplished, everything his family had ever wanted for him. But when he tried to remember the last time she'd made him laugh, or asked about his dreams, or even seemed curious about who he was beneath the Blackwell name, he came up empty. 3 weeks ago, she'd mentioned wanting separate bedrooms after they married. For practical purposes, she'd said. We both value our independence. Independence. When Celeste spoke of freedom, her eyes had lit up like she was describing flight itself. When Victoria spoke of independence, it sounded like a business arrangement. The hours crawled by. Donovan found himself pacing his apartment, wrestling with thoughts that felt foreign yet urgent. What if he called off the engagement? The financial implications alone would be catastrophic. The Montgomery merger represented 18 months of negotiations and millions in projected revenue. His father would be furious. The board would question his judgment. Society would have a field day. But then he remembered Celeste kneeling on the grass in her modest dress, offering comfort to a stranger without expecting anything in return. He thought about her daughter, growing up with a mother who chose authenticity over security every single day. I'd want to wake up next to someone who loved me for who I am when no one's watching. His own words came back to haunt him. When was the last time Victoria had seen him without his guard up? When had either of them been vulnerable with each other? At 3 a.m., he called his lawyer. Richard, I need you to review the Montgomery engagement contract. Specifically, the termination clauses. Donovan? His attorney's voice was thick with sleep. What's going on? Did something happen? I'm having second thoughts. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. About the merger or the marriage? Both. By 4 a.m., he was drafting emails he'd never thought he'd send. Resignation from 3 charity boards his mother had insisted he join. Cancellation of the engagement party venue. A meeting request with the Montgomery family patriarch. At 5 a.m., he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at Victoria's number. She deserved to hear this from him directly, not through lawyers or gossip columns. The sunrise painted his apartment in shades of gold and orange, and as the light filled the space, clarity filled his mind. Celeste was right. Kindness did change everything. Her simple act of compassion had shown him what he'd been missing: genuine human connection. By sunrise, he'd made a decision that would either destroy his carefully constructed life or finally let him start living. He picked up his phone and dialed. Victoria, I know it's early, but we need to talk. About us, about everything. Her voice was crisp, already awake and probably reviewing wedding plans. Can't this wait until after my yoga class? We have the cake tasting at noon. Actually, Donovan said, his voice steadier than he'd felt in years, I don't think it can wait any longer. The conversation that followed would be difficult. The consequences would be far-reaching. But for the first time in his adult life, Donovan Blackwell was about to make a choice based on what he wanted, not what was expected of him. Have you ever had to choose between what's expected and what's right? Let us know in the comments. 3 days later, Celeste sat in Brewing Grounds, a tiny cafe tucked between a used bookstore and a dry cleaner on the east side of town. The message from Donovan had been simple. Could we talk? I have something important to tell you. She'd almost ignored it. Billionaires didn't follow up with single mothers they'd met crying at wedding receptions. But something in his tone had made her say yes. The cafe was about as far from his usual world as possible. Mismatched chairs, local artwork covering chipped paint, and coffee served in ceramic mugs instead of bone china. When Donovan walked through the door, he looked completely out of place in his tailored suit, scanning the room like he'd never seen anything quite like it. Over here, Celeste called softly, waving from a corner table where she'd been nervously stirring her latte for the past 10 minutes. He approached cautiously, as if she might disappear if he moved too quickly. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Honestly, neither was I." She studied his face, noting the dark circles under his eyes and the tension around his mouth. "You look like you haven't slept." "I haven't. Not really." He sat down across from her, his hands fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Celeste, I need to tell you something. The other night when we talked, it changed everything for me." Her stomach fluttered with something between hope and panic. "What do you mean?" "I called off my engagement." The words hung in the air between them. Celeste felt her breath catch, her mind racing through a dozen different responses. "Donovan, please tell me you didn't do that because of our conversation." "Because it's exactly why I did it." His voice was firm, more certain than she'd heard him sound at the wedding. "But not for the reason you're thinking. I didn't call it off because I met you. I called it off because you reminded me of who I used to be, who I could still be." Celeste set down her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. "This is crazy. You don't even know me. I know you risk your good dress to comfort strangers. I know you raised a daughter who asks wise questions about happiness and money. I know you choose authenticity even when it's harder than pretending." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "I know that in 1 hour you showed me more genuine care than I've received in 34 years of living. But Donovan, this affects more than just us. I have Olivia to think about. She's been through enough upheaval with the divorce, starting over, building stability. I can't bring chaos into her life because of whatever this is." "What if it wasn't chaos?" He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hands. "What if it was the opposite?" Celeste looked at him carefully. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't know what this is between us either. Maybe it's friendship, maybe it's something more, but I know it's real." He took a shaky breath. "I'm asking if you'd be willing to find out, slowly, carefully, with Olivia's well-being as the priority." "You want to date a broke single mother with a 7-year-old who asks too many questions?" "I want to get to know a woman who kneels in the grass to help crying strangers, who raises a daughter to value wisdom over wealth, who makes choices based on love instead of expectations." His smile was tentative but genuine. "The fact that she happens to be beautiful and make me want to be a better person is just a bonus." Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "This isn't how real life works. People from your world don't end up with people from mine." "Maybe that's exactly the problem with my world." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the cafe continuing around them, coffee grinding, quiet conversations, the cash register chiming. Normal life, carrying on while her entire worldview shifted. "If we did this," she said slowly, "it would have to be different. Real. No fairy tale expectations, no trying to change each other. You'd have to understand that Olivia comes first. Always. And I'd need time to trust that this isn't just you rebelling against your family's expectations." "I understand." His relief was visible. "And Celeste, I don't want to change you. What you showed me at that wedding, that kindness, that strength, that's exactly who I hope you'll always be." It wasn't about fairy tales. It was about two people who'd found something real in a world full of pretense. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's see what happens." 6 months later, Celeste stood outside St. Agnes Chapel, a modest stone church that had served the community for over a century. No marble columns or crystal chandeliers here, just weathered wooden pews, stained glass windows that cast colored light across worn floors, and the scent of old hymnals and fresh flowers. "You ready, Mommy?" Olivia asked, straightening the simple white ribbon in her hair. She wore a pale yellow dress they'd found at Target, her small hands clutching a bouquet of daisies picked from their neighbor's garden. "I think so, sweetheart." Celeste smoothed her tea-length ivory dress, elegant but practical, something she could wear again to other occasions. "Are you ready for Mr. Donovan to be part of our family?" Olivia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "He helped me with my math homework yesterday, and he didn't get frustrated when I forgot how to carry the one. Plus, he said I could still have my own room and my stuffed animals." She nodded decisively. "I think he's good for us." Inside the chapel, 23 people filled the first few pews. Maria sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes and shaking her head in amazement. Donovan's assistant had quit in protest when he'd announced the engagement, but his lawyer Richard was there, along with 2 board members who'd known Donovan since childhood and supported his choice to follow his heart. Notably absent were his parents, who'd issued a statement through their publicist expressing disappointment in Donovan's impulsive decisions and hope that he'll reconsider before it's too late. The society pages had been brutal. Billionaire's bizarre rebound ran in 3 different magazines. The business section questioned his judgment and mental state. Stock prices had dipped for 2 weeks before recovering when investors realized his company's fundamentals remained strong. But none of that mattered as Celeste walked down the aisle, Olivia scattering daisy petals ahead of her. Donovan stood at the altar in a simple navy suit, his eyes bright with a joy she'd never seen during their months of careful courtship. No groomsmen, no elaborate productions, just a man waiting for the woman who'd changed his understanding of what love could be. The ceremony was brief and heartfelt. Pastor Williams, who'd baptized Olivia 3 years earlier, spoke about love being a choice renewed daily, not a feeling that happened to people. When it came time for vows, Donovan spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. Celeste, 6 months ago you taught me that kindness doesn't come with conditions. You showed me that real strength means being vulnerable enough to help others. I promise to love you not because you're perfect, but because you're perfectly yourself. I promise to be a good father to Olivia, not by trying to replace anyone, but by earning my place in her life every day. And I promise to use whatever resources I have to build the kind of world you're already creating, one act of compassion at a time. Celeste's voice wavered slightly as she responded. Donovan, you could have chosen safety and expectations. Instead, you chose uncertainty and hope. I promise to support your journey to become who you're meant to be, not who others expect you to be. I promise to love you in the ordinary moments as much as the extraordinary ones. And I promise that our family will always be built on honesty, even when it's harder than pretending. The rings they exchanged were simple gold bands, nothing like the elaborate diamond engagement ring that had been returned to the Montgomery family with a handwritten apology. These rings had been chosen together at a small jewelry shop downtown, their value measured in meaning rather than carats. You may kiss your bride, Pastor Williams announced with a smile. As Donovan and Celeste kissed, Olivia clapped enthusiastically from the front pew, and the small gathering erupted in applause. Outside, a few photographers waited to capture the social scandal, but inside the chapel, nobody cared about headlines or stock prices. Later, at the reception held in the church's fellowship hall, guests shared potluck dishes and stories about the couple. Maria gave a toast about friendship conquering all obstacles. Richard spoke about watching Donovan become more himself than he'd ever been. But it was Olivia who captured the essence of the day when she stood on a chair to address the room. My mommy says that being rich means having people who love you. I think we're all pretty rich today. True wealth, they'd learned, was measured in connection, not currency. 6 months after their chapel wedding, Celeste stood in the conference room of Blackwell Industries, watching Donovan present the quarterly report to his board of directors. But this wasn't the same sterile corporate environment she'd first visited as his wife. The walls now displayed children's artwork from local schools, and the agenda included updates on community programs alongside profit margins. The Single Parent Success Initiative has exceeded all projections, Donovan reported, clicking through slides that showed real families rather than abstract statistics. We've provided childcare assistance to 347 parents, enabling them to pursue job training or education. Retention rates are up 23%, and employee satisfaction scores have reached company highs. Board member Patricia Henley raised her hand. And the financial impact? Productivity is up 18% across participating departments. Turns out, when people don't have to choose between their children's well-being and their careers, they perform better. Revolutionary concept. His dry humor earned a few chuckles, but Celeste could see the genuine pride in his eyes. The old Donovan might have focused solely on numbers. This version understood that behind every statistic was a parent like Celeste, trying to build a better life for their child. After the meeting, they walked hand in hand through the company's new community center, housed in what used to be executive overflow offices. Celeste had suggested converting the space 6 months ago, and now it bustled with after-school programs, parenting classes, and small business workshops. Mrs. Blackwell, called out Sandra, a single mother of 2 who'd started her own catering business with help from the entrepreneurship program. The loan came through. I'm opening my 2nd location next month. Celeste hugged her warmly. That's wonderful, Sandra. You've worked so hard for this. These moments still felt surreal to Celeste. She'd gone from struggling to pay Olivia's school lunch fees to helping other parents access resources she'd once desperately needed. Her influence on Donovan's business decisions had been gradual but profound. She didn't just suggest charity programs, she helped him understand the real needs of working families. You know what the best part is? Donovan said as they headed home. 6 months ago, my board meetings were about maximizing shareholder value. Now they're about maximizing human potential. The profits followed naturally. At home, they found Olivia at the kitchen table. Homework spread out around her, speaking rapid Spanish with their housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez. What had started as Olivia's curiosity about different languages had blossomed into confidence and cultural awareness that amazed her teachers. Mama, tell Donovan about my science project, Olivia called out, switching seamlessly back to English. She's building a model community that shows how businesses can help families thrive. Celeste explained, watching Donovan's face light up with genuine interest. That's my influence, he said proudly, ruffling Olivia's hair. Though I suspect the actual good ideas came from your mom. The stability of their new life had transformed Olivia in ways that went beyond material comfort. She was more confident in school, eager to invite friends over, and had started asking thoughtful questions about fairness and helping others. Just last week, she donated half her allowance to the community center's backpack program. Their story had ripple effects beyond their immediate family. Richard, Donovan's lawyer, had been inspired to start pro bono work for parents facing custody battles. Maria had enrolled in business school, supported by one of Celeste's new scholarships. Even some of Donovan's former social circle had quietly begun asking about meaningful volunteer opportunities. The local newspaper had run a feature story titled "When Love Changes Everything," focusing not on their unusual romance, but on the practical changes they'd implemented. 3 other companies had reached out about creating similar employee support programs, but perhaps the most significant transformation was the foundation they'd established together, the Kindness Ripple Foundation. Starting with Donovan's resources, but guided by Celeste's understanding of real need, it focused on small interventions that created lasting change. Emergency childcare funds, car repair assistance for working parents, and scholarship programs for community college students. We're not trying to solve poverty, Celeste had explained to their first group of volunteers. We're trying to remove the obstacles that keep people from solving it themselves. Every month, they hosted Ripple dinners. In their home, casual gatherings where foundation recipients shared their stories and successes. Olivia loved these evenings, often disappearing into her room to return with hand-drawn cards for the guests. At their latest dinner, a young father named Marcus had stood to speak. 6 months ago, I was choosing between car insurance and my daughter's asthma medication. The foundation's emergency fund helped with both. But more than that, Mrs. Blackwell connected me with job training that doubled my salary. Now my daughter breathes easy, and so do I. Later that evening, as they tucked Olivia into bed in her room filled with books and art supplies, Donovan reflected on how different his life had become. Remember when you thought you were just comforting a stranger? He asked Celeste as they settled onto their couch with evening tea. I was, she replied, curling up beside him. I had no idea I was actually building a family. 1 year later, Celeste found herself standing in the same rose garden where everything had begun. The Whitmore estate was hosting its annual charity gala, but this time the Blackwell family was among the honored guests, not wedding crashers seeking refuge in the shadows. The willow tree looked the same, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze. But the marble bench beneath it now bore a small bronze plaque, in honor of unexpected kindness and the courage to change course, the Kindness Ripple Foundation. "This is where it all started, isn't it?" Olivia asked, now 8 years old and wise beyond her years. She wore a simple blue dress and carried herself with the quiet confidence that comes from being deeply loved and secure. "Right here," Celeste confirmed, watching Donovan speak with donors near the estate's fountain. "Your stepdad was sitting on this very bench, crying." Olivia studied the spot thoughtfully. Because he was scared about marrying the wrong person? Because he felt trapped by other people's expectations? "But you helped him remember who he really was." Olivia nodded sagely. "Like when I forget I'm good at math because Tommy Henderson says girls are bad at numbers and you remind me that I know better." The simplicity of her understanding took Celeste's breath away. Exactly like that. Around them, the gala continued with a different energy than that first wedding. Tonight's guests included scholarship recipients, foundation volunteers, and families whose lives had been transformed by simple acts of support. Marcus, the father whose daughter's asthma medication had been covered by emergency funds, now worked as the foundation's community outreach coordinator. Sandra had catered tonight's dinner through her expanded business. "Mrs. Blackwell?" A teenage girl approached shyly. "I'm Emma Chen. Your scholarship program helped my mom finish nursing school. She wanted me to give you this." Emma handed Celeste a handwritten card with a photo inside, a woman in scrubs standing proudly in front of a hospital, diploma in hand. "Tell your mom congratulations," Celeste said, her voice thick with emotion, "and that we're proud of her." As Emma walked away, Olivia tugged on Celeste's dress. "Mama, how many people has our family helped now?" "The foundation has provided direct assistance to over 800 families this year," Donovan said, appearing beside them with his characteristic smile. "But if we count the ripple effects, the children who stayed in school because their parents got stable jobs, the businesses that started because someone received training, it's impossible to measure." "Like when you drop a stone in the pond at the park," Olivia said. "The circles keep getting bigger and bigger until you can't see them anymore." That evening, as they prepared to leave, Celeste took one last look at the garden. A young couple sat on a nearby bench, deep in conversation, their hands intertwined. The woman was comforting the man, who looked overwhelmed by some invisible burden. "Look," she whispered to Donovan. They watched as the woman knelt beside the bench, placing a gentle hand on the man's shoulder, offering the same wordless comfort Celeste had given a stranger 1 year ago. "Maybe we should," Donovan started. "No," Celeste said softly. "They have this. Some conversations can only happen between two people who need each other in that exact moment." In the car ride home, Olivia fell asleep against Donovan's shoulder while Celeste drove. The radio played softly and the city lights blurred past the windows like scattered stars. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd walked past that night?" Donovan asked quietly. Celeste considered this. "I don't think I could have. When you see someone hurting, you help them. That's just who we are as human beings." "That's who you are," he corrected. "I had to learn it. We all had to learn it. Even Olivia's learning it every day." She glanced at their sleeping daughter in the rearview mirror. "The beautiful thing is, kindness multiplies. Every person we help learns to help someone else." She thought she was just comforting a stranger. She had no idea she was changing the world. If this story moved you, show us with a like. Share your own story of unexpected kindness in the comments. Subscribe to Hearts Unbroken for more stories that prove love conquers all. Ring the bell so you never miss a story that could change your perspective.